College kids aren't the only ones getting wasted. Imperfect food waste turned into a tasty beverage by.
Hi, I'm Jenna Shaneman.
Marcus Austin.
Danielle Weniger.
Kirsten Funk.
And myself, Tim Ladwig. So what is the problem? The problem is food waste. For those of you who don't know, food waste is food that is stopped during its life cycle from farm to fork to landfill. Globally, this is a significant problem, especially in the United States. Negative impacts of food waste include excessive greenhouse gas production, loss of wage for farmers, extra cost to consumers, and even hunger and poverty. Specifically, we're going to be looking at agricultural waste in the United States as a result of ugly or imperfect produce. According to the Department of Agriculture, billions of pounds of fruits and vegetables go to waste every year. This makes up for about 30 to 40% of the food supply chain in the United States. Up to 40% of this waste produced is a result of an ugly or wonky aesthetic. Food waste is typically thrown into landfills to rot, where it produces methane, a large contributor to greenhouse gases. Our solution is to put the ugly produce to work. We want to look at the imperfect produce that is grown in the United States that never makes it to market. We chose to look at the food waste in the United States because of the growing significance of this problem. Just as an idea, Americans waste up to 70% more food now than we did in the 1970s. So this is, in fact, a growing problem. By putting the imperfect produce to use, not only could we help the environment, but we could also help farmers be able to make a profit off their ugly produce instead of having to throw it away.
So why should we care? Well, perhaps the worst effect of food waste is its negative impacts on the environment. About 8% of total global climate pollution results from food waste, and about 40% of this food waste is a result of imperfect produce being rejected. To put that into perspective, if food waste was its own country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, closely following China and the United States. In the United States alone, 2.6% of our greenhouse gas emissions are a direct result of food waste, which is the equivalent of about 37 million cars on the road. These negative environmental impacts are due to food waste being thrown away into landfills, where they rot and release carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Both of these are large contributors to global climate change. This is an issue because globally, food waste makes up over a fifth of all the material in landfills. This rotting food not only pollutes our air, but our groundwater as well. As you can see from this image, decaying organic waste releases many chemicals in the ground, including benzene, ammonia, dioxins, and more. Another reason we should work towards reducing food waste is its impact on farmers and their wages. The main reason for this is the practice of culling, which is the removal of harvested produce into marketable and non-marketable lots based on appearance and quality standards, which can include size, shape, color, and whether or not the produce has blemishes. Studies have shown that culling can result in 20 to 40% of produce being rejected, and some articles describe how farmers can see up to 10 million pounds of food loss every single year based on imperfections alone. For example, this image shows green bell peppers that have been discarded and left to decay and rot in the sun. They were rejected because of their odd shapes, colors, and blemishes. While these peppers are still perfectly edible, they can't be taken to market to be sold and are therefore wasted. To provide a few other anecdotes, during a series of interviews, the National Resources Defense Council spoke with many farmers and packing houses about the impacts that appearance standards have had on their companies. One cucumber farmer estimated that up to 75% of the produce he is forced to reject is actually edible, but not marketable. Another tomato packing house reported that there are points in their growing season where they can fill a dump truck with 11 tons of culled tomatoes every single hour. And finally, a third farming and packaging company of citrus fruits and grapes estimated that up to half of its produce is perfectly edible, but they're forced to throw it away because of what it looks like. As you can see, farmers can be seriously affected by the guidelines that are set for marketable produce. These losses are results of supermarkets being forced to turn away produce based on appearance guidelines set by the USDA. And finally, food waste affects everyday consumers like you and me. It's been found that in their own homes, consumers waste more food than restaurants, grocery stores, or any other part of the food supply chain. According to the National Resource Defense Council, growing, processing, transporting, and disposing of uneaten food has an annual estimated cost of around $218 billion. This costs a household of four an average of $1,350 all the way up to $2,275 annually. As you can see from this image, a majority of household food waste is fresh produce, closely followed by the combination of sauces, pasta, and dessert. This food waste is the exact equivalent of wasted money for consumers.
A previous solution for the issue of imperfect food waste is the implementation of vendors that sell imperfect, deformed, or ugly produce. Within this process, farmers are still able to sell their imperfect produce and make a profit while consumers have access to fresh produce at a reduced price. These vendors specifically seek items that are unique in size, shape, and color. Most of these fruits and vegetables do not fit within FDA guidelines as high-quality foods, but are still perfectly fine for human consumption. There have been many different companies that have created delivery services that participate in this kind of business. An example is Imperfect Foods, which was founded in 2015. According to the company's website, its mission is to reduce food waste while building a better food system for consumers. They sell healthy seasonal produce pantry items, eggs, and dairy for up to 30% less than grocery store prices. To date, Imperfect Food has sold 116 million pounds of imperfect food and has employed over 1,000 people. It is currently offering services in 43 different states. Another example is Perfectly Imperfect Produce in Ohio, which was founded as a program in 2016. In late 2017, it became its own business entity known as From Seed to Spoon, LLC. On their company website, they state, "The country throws away 40% of the food we produce, which ends up in landfills where it turns into methane, a greenhouse gas that is 100 times more potent than carbon monoxide. When 21% of our water, 18% of our land, and 10% of our energy is used to grow our country's food, that's an awful lot of resources being wasted." An important assumption of this solution is that there exists a market for these types of imperfect produce boxes. So far, the startup companies that have entered this market have been successful because of the convenience and discounted price of the imperfect produce boxes. While the solution has worked well, there are also areas that can be improved. Because they can only ship to certain places within the United States, these companies have a limited range of sales. There is also not a guarantee of reducing the overall waste of produce since the fruits and vegetables are still perishable. There is also still a chance that the food could be wasted before it is even consumed. Other unintended consequences are that the food is still thrown out and not eaten, therefore being wasted altogether. A second pre-existing solution is reducing the amount of waste of imperfect fruits and vegetables by mixing them into feed for cattle, which is effectively used by Brighton's feedlot in Colorado. This feedlot initiated its recycled produce cattle feeding program in 2014, and since has decreased its costs and increases in profits. Brighton's implemented this solution into the feed it sells to its main consumer, a cattle company named Quincy Cattle Company located in Chiefland, Florida. Typically, cows gain about 1.75 pounds per day while eating normal cattle feed, but when eating feed mixed with imperfect produce, Brighton reported their cows gaining around 2.5 pounds per day. This is because the produce has extra proteins, vitamins, nutrients, and fat, allowing for the cows to gain weight faster. Not only does the feedlot save money on feed, it also is able to sell their cattle for heavier, making more money by selling their cattle for heavier, earning a larger profit. An important assumption of this solution is that farmers will adopt and execute this program. Farmers should be eager to make this change as it would mean a quicker turnaround for them to be able to sell their cattle.
So you may ask, what is our solution? Our solution is to turn these ugly fruits and vegetables into a delicious wine. Our plan is to partner with an existing winery. This would help us limit on having to buy the equipment and space to hold all the equipment along with the bottling process and winemaking process. We would also gain the knowledge and experience of the winery since they have already been in the business. We also will gain their equipment and structure so we do not have to buy any extras. So the winemaking process starts by harvesting the fruits and vegetables that are needed to make the wine. They need to be made so they're well ripened. The farmers will then ship them to us, where we will begin the winemaking process. First, we want to make sure that all of our fruits and vegetables are cleaned and the stems and roots are taken off of them. Once that is complete, we want to sanitize and clean all of our equipment before we start the winemaking process. Next, we start to begin to extract the juice. When we extract the juice, we want to take out all the pits and seeds from the fruits and vegetables. Once that is complete, we want to freeze the fruits and vegetables. This helps break down the cell membrane, and once the cell membrane is broken down, we can unthaw them and put them in nylon bags to then be pressed within the juice press. After we extract the juice, it goes into the fermentation process. This process takes about 2 to 3 weeks. During this process, the juice is added into the fermentation bin, and then extra additives such as yeast, sugar, and a commercial additive may be added depending on the type of wine and the types of fruits and vegetables that are using to be made into the wine. Next, it goes into the pressure bin. Once it's in the pressure bin, it then again takes 2 to 3 weeks. The step of the pressure bin is used to clear the wine and remove all the sediment. When it's in the pressure bin, the sediment goes to the bottom, so then in the filtration process, we can dump all the liquid that is in the pressure bin over the filter that is in the filtration process. If you think about it, it's like a coffee maker. You take the water and you pour it into the coffee maker. It then gets put over the coffee grounds, and then you have a non-sediment coffee. This is how the winemaking process happens. You take the liquid that's in the pressure bin, it gets poured over a filter where all the sediment is removed from the wine and moved on throughout the process. Once that is done, we go on to the aging process. The liquid is then put into barrels where it can be aged for months to years, depending on the type of wine that is being created. After that time is allotted, we then move on to the bottling process, and then we send it to consumers so it can be drank. Next, the part where I talked about the fermentation process, this is where this comes into play. I talked about commercial additives. In this step, all fruits and vegetables have different acidity levels. As we can see in this graph, that apples have a higher acidity level than melon. The apples, you need 7 pounds to 16 gallons of water, where melon, you only need 3 pounds of melon and no water added. This is because water is contained within the melon, unlike apples. So to create the acidity level needed for wine, you need to either add more water or less water, and sometimes you need to add commercial additives such as an acid to bring up the levels within the wine. We can also pair the melon with, say, an apple that has a higher acidity level to then balance out the acidity level.
Winemaking may seem like an out-of-the-box solution or something that's not really the first thought of when it comes to food waste, but it has been shown to be a fairly sustainable market. In 1 liter of wine, it roughly equals to 1 kilogram, and within this 1 kilogram, it produces 1.5 kilograms of CO2 within its lifetime. This is only a quarter of the amount produced within 1 kilogram of plastic. As our goal is to reduce the amount of food waste and its impacts on the environment, our company will help reduce the number of imperfect fruits and vegetables that are thrown away in farm fields. Our solution and approach to this topic and business also proved to be more sustainable by partnering with a pre-existing wine company, thus reducing our need and space to create a vineyard or additional storage, such as the main building of it all. While we try to make our solution a more attainable goal, there are some limitations and setbacks that we may run to within this process. Some of the limitations may be, first of all, finding a pre-existing wine company that is willing to partner with us to create our special type of wine. In addition to the overall costs of maintaining the current equipment and running production lines, along with the overall creation of our wine and a market to sell it off of. In an article discussing the investment and operating costs of small wineries, it was estimated that a small winery would cost a total of $560,894. This estimate is from a 2,000 case winery, which means that annually they produce 24,000 bottles of wine. And we are using this as a lay down for how much it would cost for us to run our winery. And within this large sum, it includes the total of equipment to run the production line, refrigeration and storage facilities, tasting room, offices, and the land. However, with our company using fruits from farmers, and we would not need to factor in the cost of land or making additional facilities to store it or the initial building itself, which is estimated to cost $292,000. This would then bring the total of our cost down to $268,894. The largest of this section would include the costs of receiving equipment, which is $58,000, and involves the crusher and hopper for the beginning process of the winemaking, along with the cooperage, which is $52,000, and this involves the barrels and other factors that help store the wine and keep it aging. Although our solution does have a long-term approach in mind, it does not get to the root of the problem of food waste. As it is a Band-Aid solution, having only covered up part of this very deep problem, it doesn't make it an invalid solution. By taking what is given, using produce that would be put in a landfill in the end, and turning that into a useful product, such as wine, it helps make there be a slight impact to this large problem while also giving people who are over 21 a little more fun with it. Thank you for listening to our presentation and the creation of our quite unusual wine.